If you had to do it over again, would you still do it? If I knew then what I know now, that's what we're talking about on this episode of the Driving with Rob podcast. In my last episode, I talked about Jesus and Star Trek. Because my friend Tony, whenever we would talk, we most often talked about Jesus and Star Trek. And not necessarily one or the other. We would mix them together. Well, I'm a big Star Trek fan, and so is he. And we agreed that some of our favorite Star Trek episodes were the ones where somebody went back in time. And one of my favorite Star Trek movies was Star Trek IV. In Star Trek IV is where they had to go back to the 20th century and bring two humpback whales into the 22nd century, because humpback whales were extinct by the time Spock and Captain Kirk were doing their thing. And to save the Earth, they had to go back to the 20th century when there were still humpback whales. So it's fun to look back and think, if you had to do it over again, would you? And a recurring line in Star Trek and all the Star Trek shows, whenever time travel was involved, if you went back in time and changed something, it would disrupt the timeline. If you went back in time and changed events that happened years and decades, centuries ago, how would it affect the future as you know it? And I often think, if I could go back in time and change anything, what would I change? A lot of people say they wouldn't change anything. And I really think that comes down to having a bad memory as you got older. There are a lot of things that I would change. Mostly what I would change, honestly, is things I've said to people. Unkind things, mean-spirited things, inappropriate things, stupid things that I said, and I remember that I said, that I wish I had never said. And I won't run down the list of things that I said. But there were times, especially when I've hurt somebody's feelings unnecessarily, because I spoke before I thought. So a lot of times it's not necessarily things that I did that I would change if I had the chance. But I wish I could go back and unsay some of the things I said. I wish I could go back and say some of the things that I didn't say, that I should have. I should have said I love you more often to the people that mattered. To the people that I genuinely loved, I should have said I love you more often. Harsh criticisms of people, I wish I'd not been so harsh. Things that I said trying to be funny, trying to make a joke. I wish I'd said something different. Or said what I did say differently. But there are things that I would change too. Like a few years ago when gasoline went to $4 a gallon. Some places it was even more than that. One of my sons said, I bet if you had it to do over again, you go back in time and invest in oil company stocks. I said, nope. If I knew then what I know now, I would borrow all the money I could and buy stock in Microsoft, stock in Apple. Because, yeah, oil company stock went up, especially when the price was going through the roof. But if I could go back far enough to invest in something that I knew by 2020 was going to be worth 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times more than it was worth in 1980 or 1985. Yeah, that's where I would have put all my money. I would have bought Microsoft and Apple computer stock. But then you go back even further to my high school days. If I had to redo my high school days, I probably wouldn't have played football. Because honestly, I never really was big enough to play football. My whole high school career, I was between 160 and 170 pounds. I don't think I ever made it to 170 pounds. And I was lining up across from guys who were 100 pounds bigger. Yeah, I probably wouldn't have played football. And of course, I broke my leg senior year. So Yeah, if I had it to do over again, I probably wouldn't have played football. But my friends were playing football, and my dad and my grandfather were encouraging me to play football, be a man and all that stuff. But yeah, if I had it to do over again, I never really liked it. I never really liked practice. I liked the games. I liked playing in the games, but I really hated practice. And that was one of the things that all the coaches used to say. To really be a good ball player, you kind of have to love practice. And I never did. I always hated it. I had one girlfriend in high school. If I knew then what I know now, I would have had 20 girlfriends in high school. But I didn't have the self-confidence in high school that I do now. I think my friends thought I had a lot of self-confidence, but I really didn't. I was confident around my friends, the people I knew I could trust. But yeah, the people that I just casually knew, I was very slow to open up to people like that. So you had this facade. You had to look like you were confident, even when you weren't. You had to pretend things didn't hurt you. Even though they did hurt you, you couldn't let them know it hurt you. I would have probably had more friends in high school, more close friends, if I knew then what I know now. But then you think again about Star Trek. If I could go back and change things that happened in the past, would it alter the timeline? Would it change my future, my present, if I could go back and change things? And I think about things like, would I ever have met my wife? Would I have ever known my 5 children? And then when I came back, realizing that I don't have those kids anymore, if I could go back and change things, how many things, how many people, how many experiences would I miss out on? People and events that have meant so much to me maybe would never have happened. So in the grand scheme of things, if I could go back and do things differently, if it meant never having met people who mean so much to me today, and if it meant never learning the lessons that experience taught me through failure, you learn lessons through making mistakes. And if going back in time meant that I would never learn those lessons, I'd have to learn them all over again. If I went back in time and changed something, and it meant that I would never meet my wife, would never have the kids that I had, I guess I wouldn't change a thing. And that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. I appreciate you listening. Thanks for downloading. Share it with a friend. Leave me a comment. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye now.